One of the reasons I'm so grateful to be a Unitarian Universalist is that our movement recognizes that we are all complex people on a complex journey. And that not only will one single religious message not work for all of us, but a single religious approach is not enough for any one of us. We experience different needs for meaning and purpose across the span of our lifetimes, and we also need more than one instrument in our toolbox at any one time. I've found it so valuable to be exposed to a variety of traditions and a variety of spiritual practices so that I'm reminded of just how abundant our options are. This morning I'd like to explore with you yet another way to think of these options, one that is well suited to the winter months and especially to the weeks after Christmas. Even for those who don't celebrate Christmas, it's nearly impossible to escape the relentless holiday consumerism and aggressive Yuletide cheeriness throughout the month of December. As the natural world outside our windows grows chill and dons muted colors and longer darkness, our winter celebrations compensate especially with expressions of light. Burning the Yule log, lighting candles, decorating our homes with twinkling lights, so much attention invested in keeping the darkness at bay during the longest nights of the year. In a similar manner, many of us experience December as a time of demanding activity and complicated emotions. Not only the shopping, cooking, decorating, and entertaining, but also sometimes the difficult relationships, disappointments, isolation, losses, and grief that the holiday expectations bring to the surface. Although the carols assure us that this is the most wonderful time of the year, a growing number of our congregations are also holding what we call Blue Christmas services to recognize how emotionally complicated this season is. How can the messiness of our real lives possibly ever live up to the glossy magazine photos and the soft focus television specials? Children are especially vulnerable to the jarring cycle of anticipation and letdown. As summed up by one youngster who sobbed afterward, "I have to wait 2 billion years for Christmas. When it comes, it only lasts a second. Then the whole world is plain again." So much glittering expectation cannot possibly be satisfied, and the return to reality is hard. But now the book of the year stands nearly filled. Its last pages remain to be turned. With all of the light and activity and consumption of the Christmas season now falling behind us and the whole world plain again, the end of the year presents a different tone, an invitation to turn inward and contemplate, assessing the past and anticipating the future. Living in the North has offered many opportunities to reflect further on the fact that the depths of winter is not a joyful time for all people, and that the season also symbolizes qualities of our lives that we might wish we could avoid. In addition to the inconveniences of windshields to scrape and sidewalks to shovel, runny noses and frozen pipes, the darkness and cold of winter also call to mind more challenging emotional and spiritual states. We may experience an inner winter as well as an outer one. When I need help making sense of this question of seasons of the soul, the resource that I most often turn to is the work of priest and author Matthew Fox. A native of Madison, Fox entered the Catholic priesthood and engaged in a thorough study of the mystical traditions in ancient and medieval Christianity, as well as in other world religions and indigenous cultures, and realized that the church's emphasis on sin and redemption was a perversion of the broader religious impulse recognized in so many other movements. At the heart of conventional Christianity is the teaching that the guilt of Adam and Eve's disobedience in the Garden of Eden is inherited by all of us, by all humans, and that the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ is required to return us to good relationship with our Creator. Fox's studies led him to reject this pessimistic doctrine of original sin and replace it with what he calls, as you saw the title of the book, original blessing. The teaching that we are never fully separated from the source of our creation, and that our mistakes do not erase our ultimate capacity for goodness and wholeness. This fundamental realization inspired him to purge traditional Christianity of the toxic consequences of original sin and develop an alternative movement he calls creation spirituality. In addition to our natural capacity for goodness rather than sin, Fox's teaching focuses on all of nature, and not just humans' concerns, on flourishing rather than suffering, and on this life rather than an afterlife. With these emphases, it's not surprising that creation spirituality appeals to a lot of Unitarian Universalists who reject traditional Christianity's focus on human sinfulness. It's also not surprising that the Catholic Church expelled him from the priesthood for his heretical teachings. We tried to get him in the Unitarian Universalism, but he decided that our ambivalence about Christianity did not make it a welcoming place for him, and so he is now an Episcopalian priest instead. Central to creation spirituality is a model of our inner journey as four paths or emphases that are constantly in dialogue with each other. Fox has named these the via positiva, the positive way, the via negativa, the negative way, the via creativa, the way of creativity, and the via transformativa, the way of transformation. In particular, it's the first two that are central to our conversation this morning about how we might get the most out of this wintry turning of the year. The positive way is the path celebrating fullness and abundance. It is awe and delight and gratitude for activity, for beauty, for all the blessings and pleasures in our lives. This path rejects the cynical doctrine of original sin and replaces it with optimism and celebration of the sacred everywhere around us and within us. It is summed up in the ecstatic writings of poets like Walt Whitman and Mary Oliver. Hear Oliver's expression of the positive way in her poem, Why I Wake Early. Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you who made the morning and spread it over the fields and into the faces of the tulips and the nodding morning glories, and into the windows of even the miserable and the crotchety. Best preacher that ever was, dear star that just happens to be where you are in the universe to keep us from ever darkness, to ease us with warm touching, to hold us in the great hands of light. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Watch now how I start the day in happiness and kindness. You may be struck, as I was, at how appealing this kind of spirituality sounds. The outlook of the positive way is very much at home in Unitarian Universalism, where our nature-affirming views lead us to appreciate beauty and pleasure, and to take a fairly optimistic view of creation and human behavior. As I was considering the positive way in light of the end of the year, it occurred to me how well it also describes all of the things we do around the holidays to hold back the darkness and the emptiness of winter. The lights, the music, the hectic consumption and activity. But Fox and other religious scholars have noticed how readily we in the Western world over-identify with this first path. On a theological level, we easily succumb to the pitfall of substituting everyday things for the divine, for mistaking the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. On a human level, by emphasizing light, busyness, entertainment, and pleasure, we've become afraid of the dark, of stillness, of silence, and the everyday. This is the risk of the positive way, that we're reluctant to let it be balanced out by other states of being. Historically, the Christian church has responded to this not by seeking balance, but instead by condemning sources of joy and pleasure as irreligious, denouncing the body and its pleasures and our love of beauty and passion. And so in the Western world, the elements of the positive way are viewed as not only pleasurable, but also forbidden, a likely recipe for dysfunctional living, for a life out of balance. I regularly also see this in Unitarian Universalist congregations. Many of us come to this tradition after rejecting the idols and symbols of our childhood, but it's tempting to give up on seeking entirely, to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think of the many pastoral conversations I've had with people in our congregations who guiltily confess, I don't think I believe in God anymore. When I ask in response, tell me about the God you don't believe in. Often what I hear is that the bearded father god caricature that they are rejecting. German mystic Meister Eckhart admitted, I pray to God to rid me of God. That is, to rid him of the earthly idols that cannot ever represent the divine. Fox explains, while the Via Positiva teaches us the cosmic breadth of living, the Via Negativa opens us to our divine depths. The elements of the negative way include darkness, silence, emptiness, waiting, loss, sadness, uncertainty, letting go. Such a contrast from the first path. Listen to these bits of sacred poetry from the negative way, each with a bit of silence so that we can appreciate them. From Meister Eckhart, nothing in all creation is so like God as stillness. From Rainer Maria Rilke, no matter how deeply I go down into myself, my God is dark and like a web, 100 roots silently drinking. From Rumi, secretly we spoke, that wise one and me. I said, tell me the secrets of the world. He said, shh, let silence tell you the secrets of the world. And from Marge Piercy, connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground. You cannot tell always by looking what is happening. More than half the tree is spread out in the soil under your feet. Penetrate quietly as the earthworm that blows no trumpet. Fight persistently as the creeper that brings down the tree. Spread like the squash plant that overruns the garden. Gnaw in the dark, and use the sun to make sugar. Weave real connections, create real nodes, build real houses. Live a life you can endure. Make love that is loving. Keep tangling and interweaving and taking more in, a thicket and bramble wilderness to the outside, but to us interconnected with rabbit runs and burrows and lairs. When we fail to make room for the negative way, when we allow our responses to be dominated by the glittering, entertaining, positive way, our lives run the risk of focusing only on stimulation and superficial pleasures. And religion becomes preoccupied with controlling sin and rejecting the imperfect. The negative way calls us to recognize and celebrate not only the beautiful flowers and the rich harvest, but also the soil awaiting the seed. Not only the birth, but also the gestation. Not only the event, but also the waiting. Not only the musical note, but also the silence between the notes. Not only the act of creation, but also the moment before, when all still waits in possibility and potential. I've been excited for quite some time at the thought of us exploring Matthew Fox and creation spirituality together. But I have to confess that I've also felt a lot of anxiety over the possibility that I might not explain it clearly enough. Especially because our culture is so accustomed to overlooking the negative way, we easily misunderstand it. First of all, the negative way is most definitely not about rejecting pleasure or beauty or stimulation, but recognizing that they cannot be the whole picture if we are to live honest lives. The negative way is not negativity, although it acknowledges many qualities that our culture and our religions have tried to discredit, including chaos, mystery, shadow, and doubt. The negative way is not glorifying sadness or depression, but is making room for them on our journey. It is not elevating suffering, but is setting a place at the table for our suffering too. This point is very much a continuation of the message of the service I did here 3 weeks ago, in which we talked about the Buddhist techniques of holding our tender hearts open in the face of emotions that frighten us. The negative way can feel threatening partly because it reveals that for all of its appeal, the positive way alone will not fulfill us, will not allow us to build lives of meaning. No matter how much activity and stimulation we fill our lives with, no matter what new toys we buy, no matter what new spiritual fads we embrace, the breadth of our lives will not ever be a substitute for depth. I'm emphasizing this particular point because more than ever, we need places like this community where we respond to the actual challenges of our lives and come to know that the church is a place not only for upbeat emotions and happy times. Trusting this place and these people with the parts of ourselves that seem unlovable is an act of open-heartedness that gets too little recognition. Again, I turn to the words of Mary Oliver, who writes, "Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this, too, was a gift." And so I ask you this morning, how do you make room in your life for the qualities that Matthew Fox describes as the negative way? How do you entrust others with these challenging moments and open your heart to theirs. Again, we are complicated beings on a complicated journey, in which the meaningful search is not made up only of our happy or comfortable moments. At this turning of the year, I wish us not simple answers and cheap resolution, but the clarity and the bravery to experience and hold the world as it truly is in the tender cradle of our hearts. May it be so. And now, as we always like to do, we invite your questions and comments into this conversation.